The silver platter crashed to the marble floor with a sound like thunder, sending shards of porcelain and droplets of wine cascading across the pristine white stones of the royal dining hall. Lady Seraphina Blackwood watched in horror as 3 months of careful planning, the perfect welcome feast for the visiting Duke of Ravencrest, dissolved into chaos before her eyes. "You clumsy, worthless creature." Queen Isabel's voice cut through the stunned silence like a blade, her perfectly painted lips twisted into a snarl of rage. "Look what you've done! The Duke will think we're nothing but barbarians." Seraphina dropped to her knees, frantically trying to gather the broken pieces, while her heart hammered against her ribs. As the palace's head event coordinator, she had organized hundreds of royal functions without a single mishap. But tonight, in front of the most important guest the kingdom had entertained in decades, her hands had betrayed her at the worst possible moment. "Your Majesty, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the murmur of shocked courtiers. "It was an accident. The platter was heavier than I expected." "Accident?" The Queen's laugh was like breaking glass. "This is what happens when we allow commoners to rise above their station. Your father may have been a minor lord, but clearly breeding will tell." The insult hit like a physical blow. Seraphina's father had died serving the crown, and her mother had worked herself to death trying to maintain their small estate afterward. Seraphina had come to court at 16, with nothing but her intelligence and determination, clawing her way up from a servant's position to become one of the most trusted members of the royal household. Until tonight. "Guards," Queen Isabel commanded, her voice carrying the absolute authority of someone who had never been denied anything in her life. "Remove this person from my sight. And see that she's stripped of her position immediately. Please, Your Majesty," Seraphina begged, still on her knees among the wreckage of her career. "Give me another chance. I've served faithfully for 7 years. 7 years of pretending to be something you're not," the Queen said coldly. 7 years of fooling us into thinking a peasant could handle responsibilities meant for her betters. The guards moved forward, but before they could reach her, a new voice cut through the tension, deep, cultured, and carrying an undertone of power that made everyone in the room freeze. How fascinating. All eyes turned toward the great doors, where a figure stood silhouetted against the torchlight of the corridor beyond. He was tall and lean, dressed in an elegant black coat that seemed to absorb the light around it. When he stepped into the dining hall, Seraphina felt her breath catch in her throat. The man was devastatingly handsome in an otherworldly way, pale skin that seemed to glow in the candlelight, dark hair that looked like spun midnight, and eyes the color of fresh blood that seemed to see everything and judge it all. When he moved, it was with a fluid grace that spoke of predatory power barely held in check. "Your Grace." Queen Isabel's demeanor changed instantly, her rage replaced by simpering deference. "We weren't expecting you until—" "I arrived early," the Duke said, his gaze never leaving Seraphina's kneeling form. "And it seems I've walked into quite a drama. Tell me, what crime has this young woman committed that warrants such theatrical punishment?" "She destroyed the welcome feast we prepared in your honor," the Queen said quickly. "Ruined everything with her clumsiness and incompetence." "Did she?" The Duke moved closer, and Seraphina caught his scent, sandalwood and winter air, with something darker underneath that made her pulse quicken with an emotion she couldn't name. "And what was this feast supposed to consist of?" "The finest delicacies our kingdom has to offer," Queen Isabel said proudly. "Roasted peacock with golden sauce, wine-braised venison, honeyed fruits from our royal orchards." "How conventional," the Duke said, and there was something in his tone that made the Queen's smile falter. "Tell me, Your Majesty, do you know anything about my dietary preferences?" "Your dietary preferences?" The Queen looked confused. "I'm sure our chef can accommodate any special requirements you might have. I'm sure he can't." The Duke's smile revealed teeth that were just a little too sharp to be entirely human. "You see, I have very specific needs that your conventional feast would not have satisfied." Seraphina looked up at him from her position on the floor, her mind racing. There was something about the way he spoke, the way he moved, the way the very air around him seemed to thrum with barely contained power, and those eyes, those impossible red eyes that seemed to glow with their own inner light. "I don't understand," Queen Isabel said, her voice growing shrill with confusion and barely suppressed panic. "Of course you don't," the Duke said gently, but there was steel beneath the silk of his words. "But perhaps this young woman does. Tell me, my dear," he said, addressing Serafina directly. "What do you know about creatures that feed on more than just conventional food?" The question was so unexpected, so direct, that Serafina felt her carefully constructed composure crack. She had read stories, of course, tales of beings that lived in the shadows, that sustained themselves on blood and darkness, and things that ordinary people couldn't understand. But those were just stories, weren't they? I know that some beings have needs that go beyond ordinary sustenance," she said carefully, her voice stronger than she felt. "I know that what nourishes one creature might be poison to another." "Exactly." The Duke's smile was brilliant and genuinely pleased. "And do you think you could prepare food for such a being if you knew what they required?" "I could try," Serafina said, meeting his impossible gaze directly, "if someone were willing to teach me." "Fascinating," the Duke murmured again, then turned back to Queen Isabel. "Your Majesty, I find myself in need of a personal cook, someone who can cater to my unique requirements. Would you be willing to lend me this young woman's services?" "But she's been dismissed," the Queen protested. "She's no longer fit for royal service." "Then it's fortunate that I'm not asking for royal service," the Duke said smoothly. "I'm asking for personal service. Surely you wouldn't deny a guest such a simple request." The Queen's face went through several interesting color changes as she struggled to find a way to refuse without insulting a duke. "Of course not, Your Grace, but surely one of our trained kitchen staff would be more suitable." "I think not. This one has potential." The Duke extended his hand toward Serafina, who was still kneeling among the broken porcelain. "My dear, would you be willing to accept such a position?" Serafina stared at his outstretched hand, pale, elegant, with long fingers that looked like they could create beauty or destruction with equal ease. She was being offered salvation by a man who was clearly not entirely human, a chance to escape the humiliation and ruin that awaited her if she remained at court. It was probably the most dangerous decision she would ever make. "Yes," she said, placing her hand in his, "I accept." The moment their skin touched, Serafina felt a jolt of electricity that had nothing to do with static and everything to do with the otherworldly power that radiated from the Duke like heat from a forge. He helped her to her feet with surprising gentleness, his red eyes never leaving her face. "Excellent," he said softly. "I believe this arrangement will prove mutually beneficial." As the Duke led her from the dining hall, Serafina caught a glimpse of Queen Isabel's face, pale with shock and twisted with impotent rage. The other courtiers whispered behind their fans and goblets, their voices creating a susurrus of speculation that followed her like a wake. She was leaving behind everything she had worked for, everything she had built over 7 years of careful service. But as she walked beside the mysterious Duke through corridors she had once navigated as a trusted member of the royal household, Serafina felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope. "Tell me," the Duke said as they walked, his voice pitched for her ears alone, "what is your name?" "Serafina Blackwood, Your Grace." "Serafina," he repeated, and her name on his lips sounded like poetry. "A beautiful name for a beautiful woman. I am Adrian Dracul, Duke of Ravencrest, and I believe you and I are going to get along very well indeed." "Your Grace," Serafina said carefully, "might I ask what exactly my duties will entail?" "You will cook for me," Adrian said simply, "but not in the way you've cooked for others. You will learn to prepare sustenance for a being whose needs are unconventional. And if I fail, if I cannot learn what you require—" Adrian stopped walking and turned to face her, his red eyes serious. "Then you will return to your former life. No worse for the experience. But Serafina, I don't think you will fail. I think you have exactly the kind of mind needed for this work." "What kind of mind is that?" One that asks questions instead of accepting limitations, one that sees possibilities where others see only problems. Adrian's smile was warm and genuine, one that belongs to a woman brave enough to kneel in broken porcelain rather than abandon her responsibilities. They had reached the guest quarters, where Adrian's servants were waiting with obvious relief. Serafina noticed immediately that they moved with the same fluid grace as their master, and their skin had the same pale, luminous quality. "Marcus," Adrian said to a man who appeared to be his valet, "please see that Miss Blackwood is given appropriate quarters and anything she might need. Tomorrow evening, we begin her education." "Tomorrow evening?" Serafina asked. "Not tomorrow morning?" "I keep nocturnal hours," Adrian said with a slight smile. "Another of my peculiarities. I hope that won't be a problem." "Not at all." "Your Grace, I've always been something of a night owl myself." "Perfect, until tomorrow evening then." As Adrian disappeared into his chambers, Serafina found herself following Marcus through corridors she had never seen before, toward quarters that would be hers for however long this strange arrangement lasted. "Miss," Marcus said as they walked, his voice carrying a slight accent she couldn't place, "might I offer some advice?" "Please." "His Grace is unusual, but he is also kind in his way. If you serve him faithfully and learn what he teaches you, you will find him a generous master." "And if I don't?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "His Grace does not suffer incompetence, but he is patient with those who try. The question is not whether you can learn, miss. The question is whether you want to." The quarters Marcus showed her to were far more luxurious than anything she had ever been given at court. A sitting room with a fireplace, a bedroom with a bed large enough for 3 people, and a small kitchen area that made her heart race with excitement. It was equipped with tools and ingredients she had only dreamed of using. "His Grace thought you might like to familiarize yourself with the facilities," Marcus explained, "though I should warn you, some of the ingredients are unusual." Serafina moved to examine the pantry and felt her eyebrows rise. Alongside conventional spices and herbs were substances she didn't recognize. Dark powders that seemed to absorb light, liquids that glowed faintly in their bottles, dried plants that looked like they belonged in an apothecary rather than a kitchen. "What are these for?" she asked. "You'll learn tomorrow evening," Marcus said diplomatically. "For now, I suggest you rest. His Grace's lessons can become intensive." After Marcus left, Serafina sat in her new sitting room and tried to process everything that had happened. In the space of a few hours, she had gone from the height of her career to utter disgrace to... What? What exactly had she agreed to? She was going to cook for a man who was clearly not human, using ingredients that defied conventional understanding, for purposes she couldn't begin to imagine. It was either the opportunity of a lifetime or the most dangerous mistake she had ever made. But as she looked around her beautiful new quarters and thought about the alternative, returning to court in disgrace, begging for scraps of work from people who had witnessed her humiliation, Serafina realized she didn't care about the danger. For the first time in her life, she was going to learn something completely new, something that no other cook had ever been taught. Whatever Duke Adrian Dracul was, whatever he needed from her, it had to be more interesting than preparing the same conventional dishes for the same boring courtiers day after day. She was ready for an adventure. She just hoped she would survive it. The next evening, Serafina dressed carefully in a simple but elegant gown and made her way to the kitchen area of Adrian's quarters. She had spent the day exploring her new rooms and trying to identify the mysterious ingredients in her pantry, but she was no closer to understanding what she was supposed to do with them. Adrian was waiting for her, dressed in dark clothing that made his pale skin seem to glow in the candlelight. He had set out several items on the kitchen table, a crystal decanter filled with dark liquid, a selection of the unusual ingredients from her pantry, and what appeared to be an ancient cookbook bound in leather that looked suspiciously like human skin. "Good evening, Serafina," he said, his voice warm with genuine pleasure. "Are you ready to begin your education?" "I think so," she said, moving closer to the table, "though I admit I'm not sure what I'm supposed to learn." "You're going to learn to cook for a vampire," Adrian said simply, as if he were discussing the weather. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication and impossibility. Serafina stared at him, her mind struggling to process what he had just said. "A vampire," she repeated slowly. "Yes, a creature that feeds on blood, possesses supernatural strength and speed, and has lived for far longer than any human lifetime." Adrian's red eyes were steady and serious. "A creature that requires very specific sustenance to maintain his strength and sanity." "And you're?" "I am Adrian Dracul, Prince of the Vampire Court of Ravencrest, and I have been alive for over 400 years. Adrian's smile was gentle, but showed those two sharp teeth clearly. "I am also at this moment very hungry." Serafina felt the world tilt around her. Vampires were real. The man standing before her was a vampire, and she had just agreed to cook for him. "I understand if you want to leave," Adrian said quietly. "I understand if this is too much, too strange, too dangerous. I can have you return to court with a story that will restore your reputation." "What kind of story?" "That you were instrumental in preparing a feast that perfectly suited my needs. That your skills impressed me so much, I offered you a permanent position, which you gracefully declined in order to continue serving your kingdom." It was a generous offer, a way out that would save her career and her reputation. All she had to do was walk away from the most extraordinary opportunity she had ever been given. "What would I be cooking?" she asked instead. Adrian's smile was brilliant with relief and admiration. "Dishes that enhance and complement blood, rather than replacing it. Foods that can help a vampire maintain his humanity while satisfying his darker needs. Cuisine that bridges the gap between the mortal and immortal worlds. And you think I can learn to do that? I think you're the first person I've met who might be able to master it." Adrian moved to the crystal decanter and poured a small amount of the dark liquid into a goblet. "This is blood, Serafina, human blood, freely given by willing donors who are well compensated for their contribution. It is my primary sustenance, but it is not my only need." Serafina looked at the goblet, her stomach churning slightly, but her curiosity was stronger than her revulsion. "What are your other needs?" "Vampires require more than just blood to thrive. We need foods that enhance our supernatural abilities, that help us maintain our connection to the human world, that satisfy hungers that go beyond the physical." Adrian gestured to the ancient cookbook. "This contains recipes that have been passed down through vampire nobility for centuries. Dishes that can make the difference between a vampire who retains his humanity and one who becomes a mindless monster. And you want me to learn to prepare these dishes? I want you to learn to create new ones, to take the ancient knowledge and combine it with modern techniques, to develop cuisine that can help vampires like myself live in the modern world without losing ourselves to our darker nature." The scope of what he was asking was staggering. He wasn't just asking her to cook for him. He was asking her to help him remain human while being something fundamentally inhuman. "Why me?" Serafina asked. "Why not find a vampire who already knows these techniques?" "Because vampire cooks prepare food the way it has always been prepared, without innovation or creativity. They follow ancient recipes without understanding the principles behind them." Adrian's eyes were intense with passion. "You have something they lack, the ability to see possibilities, to experiment, to create something entirely new." "How can you be so sure?" "Because of what I saw tonight in that dining hall. When faced with disaster, you didn't make excuses or blame others. You took responsibility and tried to fix what was broken. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." Serafina felt heat rise in her cheeks at the compliment. "And if I agree to this, what happens to me? Do I become your servant? Your prisoner?" "You become my partner," Adrian said firmly. "My equal in this endeavor. You will be compensated generously for your work. You will have complete freedom to come and go as you please, and you will have access to knowledge that no other human possesses." "And the danger? Surely there must be danger in working so closely with a vampire." "There is always danger in the unknown," Adrian admitted. "But Serafina, I give you my word that you will never be harmed while under my protection. I may be a vampire, but I am also a gentleman." Serafina looked around the kitchen at the mysterious ingredients and ancient cookbook, at the vampire prince who was offering her the chance to create something entirely new. It was terrifying and impossible and absolutely fascinating. "Where do we start?" she asked. Adrian's smile was radiant. "We start with the basics. The foundation of all vampire cuisine is understanding how different foods interact with blood, how they can enhance or diminish its effects. Tonight, you're going to learn to prepare your first blood-enhanced dish." "What kind of dish?" "Something simple to begin with. A soup that will help me maintain my strength while satisfying my need for more complex flavors." Adrian opened the ancient cookbook to a page covered in elegant script. "This recipe is over 200 years old, but I think we can improve upon it." For the next several hours, Serafina found herself immersed in the most extraordinary cooking lesson of her life. Adrian guided her through the preparation of a soup that combined blood with herbs and spices in ways that seemed to defy conventional understanding of flavor. The herbs weren't just seasonings. They were carefully chosen for their supernatural properties. Wolfsbane to enhance vampire strength, nightshade to sharpen supernatural senses, and a dozen other plants that existed in the liminal space between the natural and supernatural worlds. "The key," Adrian explained as she stirred the mixture, "is balance. Too much of any one ingredient and the dish becomes either ineffective or dangerous. Too little and it provides no benefit beyond ordinary food. How do you know when the balance is right? Experience and instinct. You'll develop both with time." Adrian watched her work with obvious approval. "You have excellent knife skills, by the way. Where did you learn to cook?" "From my mother, originally. She taught me that cooking was about more than just feeding people. It was about nourishing them body and soul." Serafina added a pinch of what Adrian had told her was powdered moonstone. "When I came to court, I worked in the kitchens for 3 years before I was promoted to event planning. And you missed it. The cooking, I mean. Every day. Event planning was prestigious, but it wasn't creative. It was just organizing other people's work." Serafina tasted the soup and frowned. "This needs something. It's too flat." "What would you add?" "In a normal soup, a touch of wine, maybe some lemon juice to brighten the flavors." Serafina looked at the array of supernatural ingredients. "But this isn't a normal soup, is it?" "No, it's not. But the principles of good cooking still apply. What do you think might brighten supernatural flavors?" Serafina studied the ingredients, her mind racing. "This," she said finally, reaching for a bottle of silvery liquid. "What is this?" "Liquid starlight, captured moonbeams distilled into their essence." Adrian's eyebrows rose. "It's extremely rare and powerful." "Are you sure?" "Just a few drops," Serafina said, adding the starlight to the soup. The liquid shimmered as it mixed with the other ingredients, and the entire mixture began to glow with a soft, ethereal light. Adrian tasted the soup, and his eyes widened with surprise and delight. Extraordinary. The starlight doesn't just brighten the flavor, it enhances every other ingredient, makes them work together in perfect harmony. Is it good? It's revolutionary. Adrian set down the spoon and looked at her with something approaching awe. "Serafina, you've just improved upon a recipe that vampire cooks have been making the same way for 2 centuries, on your first attempt. Really? Really? You have a gift for this, a natural understanding of how supernatural ingredients work together. With training, you could become the greatest vampire chef who has ever lived." The praise made Serafina's heart race with excitement and pride. "What else can you teach me?" "Everything," Adrian said, his red eyes warm with affection and admiration. "If you're willing to learn, I can teach you secrets that no human has ever known. I can show you how to create dishes that can heal supernatural wounds, enhance magical abilities, even help vampires walk in sunlight for brief periods. That's possible. With the right combination of ingredients and techniques, almost anything is possible." Adrian moved closer, and Serafina caught his scent again, that intoxicating mixture of sandalwood and danger. "But it will require dedication, Serafina. It will require you to trust me completely and to push the boundaries of everything you think you know about cooking." "I'm ready," Serafina said without hesitation. "I want to learn everything you can teach me." Then we begin tomorrow night with Lesson 2, preparing food that can satisfy a vampire's need for more than just blood. As Adrian walked her back to her quarters, Serafina's mind was spinning with possibilities. She had just cooked her first supernatural meal, and it had been unlike anything she had ever experienced. The ingredients had seemed to respond to her touch, to work together in ways that defied conventional understanding. "Adrian," she said as they reached her door, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Why do you need food beyond blood? I thought vampires only fed on blood." Adrian was quiet for a moment, his expression growing thoughtful. "Blood sustains our bodies, but we need more than just physical sustenance to remain human, without other forms of nourishment, emotional, intellectual, spiritual. We risk losing ourselves to the monster within. And food helps with that. The right food, prepared with understanding and care, can help a vampire maintain his connection to humanity. It can satisfy hungers that blood alone cannot touch." Adrian's smile was sad and beautiful. "It can remind us that we were once human ourselves, and that humanity is worth preserving." "Is that why you chose me? Because you thought I could help you stay human?" "I chose you because you see cooking as more than just a job. You understand that food can nourish the soul as well as the body." Adrian's red eyes were intense with emotion. "And because from the moment I saw you kneeling in that broken porcelain, refusing to abandon your responsibilities even in disgrace, I knew you were someone worth knowing." As Serafina settled into her bed that night, she reflected on the extraordinary turn her life had taken. 24 hours ago, she had been the palace's head event coordinator, respected and successful. Now she was learning to cook for a vampire prince, using ingredients that shouldn't exist to create dishes that defied everything she thought she knew about food. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it was the most exciting thing that had ever happened to her. She was going to learn secrets that no human had ever known. She was going to create cuisine that could bridge the gap between the mortal and immortal worlds, and she was going to do it all under the guidance of a man who looked at her as if she were something precious and rare. Tomorrow night couldn't come soon enough. Over the following weeks, Serafina's education in supernatural cuisine progressed at a pace that amazed even Adrian. Each evening brought new lessons, new ingredients, new techniques that pushed the boundaries of everything she thought she knew about cooking. She learned to prepare blood wines that could enhance a vampire's supernatural senses, to create breads infused with moonlight that could help the undead maintain their connection to the natural world, and to craft desserts made from crystallized dreams that could satisfy hungers that went far beyond the physical. But it was more than just the cooking that captivated her. It was Adrian himself, the way his eyes lit up when she successfully mastered a new technique, the way he spoke about food as if it were poetry, the way he treated her not as a servant, but as a true partner in their culinary experiments. "Tonight," Adrian announced as she entered the kitchen for her lesson, "we're going to attempt something that has never been done before." "What's that?" Serafina asked, tying her apron around her waist with practiced ease. "We're going to create a dish that can allow a vampire to taste human food the way humans do." Adrian's expression was both excited and nervous. For centuries, vampires have been unable to truly enjoy conventional cuisine. Our altered physiology makes most human food taste like ash or worse. But you think it's possible to change that? I think you might be able to change that. Your understanding of how supernatural ingredients interact with conventional ones is unlike anything I've ever seen. Adrian gestured to an array of ingredients laid out on the kitchen table, some familiar, others that seemed to glow with their own inner light. The theory is that if we can create a preparation that temporarily alters a vampire's palate, we could allow them to experience human cuisine as it was meant to be experienced. Serafina studied the ingredients with growing excitement. What would be the base? What would carry the transformative properties? That's what we need to figure out. It would need to be something that could coat the palate without being overwhelming, something that could interact with vampire physiology without causing harm. "A sauce," Serafina said immediately, "something light but complex, that could enhance rather than mask the flavors of whatever it accompanies." "Exactly what I was thinking, but what kind of sauce?" Serafina moved among the ingredients, her mind racing with possibilities. She had learned to trust her instincts when working with supernatural components, to let her intuition guide her toward combinations that shouldn't work, but somehow did. "This," she said, picking up a vial of what Adrian had told her was essence of transformation, a rare substance distilled from butterfly chrysalises during the moment of metamorphosis. "And this," she added, selecting a bottle of liquid that looked like captured aurora borealis. "And," she paused, her hand hovering over a selection of more conventional ingredients. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that if we want to help a vampire taste human food, we need to include something fundamentally human in the preparation." Serafina reached for a small bottle of honey. "This is made by bees from flowers that grow in purely human spaces. No supernatural influence, no magical enhancement, just the simple sweetness of the natural world." "Brilliant," Adrian breathed. The honey could serve as an anchor, keeping the transformation grounded in human experience, rather than letting it drift into purely supernatural territory. They worked together for hours, experimenting with proportions and techniques, creating source after source that either failed completely or produced effects that were too extreme to be useful. But with each failure, they learned something new, refined their understanding of how the ingredients worked together. "Try this," Serafina said finally, offering Adrian a spoon with a small amount of their latest creation. The sauce was opalescent, shifting between colors like oil on water, and it seemed to hum with barely contained energy. Adrian tasted it carefully, his expression unreadable. Then his eyes widened with wonder. "Serafina," he said softly, "bring me an apple." She handed him a simple red apple from the bowl of conventional fruit she kept for experimentation. Adrian took a bite, and the expression that crossed his face was one of pure amazement. "I can taste it," he whispered. "Not just the blood-like qualities that apples usually have for vampires, but the actual sweetness, the tartness, the complex flavors that humans experience." He took another bite, his eyes closing in bliss. "It's extraordinary. It worked." Serafina could hardly believe it. "It worked. For the first time in 400 years, I can taste human food the way it was meant to be tasted." Adrian set down the apple and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around the kitchen in a burst of pure joy. "Do you understand what you've just accomplished? You've created something that could revolutionize the way vampires interact with the human world." "We created it," Serafina corrected, though she was laughing with delight at his enthusiasm. "I couldn't have done it without your knowledge of vampire physiology. And I couldn't have done it without your intuitive understanding of how flavors work together." Adrian set her down but kept his hands on her waist, his red eyes warm with affection and something deeper. "Serafina, you're remarkable. In just a few weeks, you've mastered techniques that take most vampire chefs decades to learn." "I have a good teacher," she said, acutely aware of how close they were standing, how his hands felt warm against her waist despite his vampire nature. "You have natural talent that no amount of teaching can create." Adrian's voice grew softer, more intimate. "You have a gift for this, Serafina. A gift for creating magic in the kitchen." "Is that what this is, magic?" "The best cooking always is, whether it's a simple meal that brings a family together or a supernatural preparation that can change the very nature of how someone experiences the world." Adrian's thumb traced a gentle circle on her waist. "You understand that instinctively. You cook with your heart as well as your hands." Serafina felt heat rise in her cheeks at the compliment and the intensity in his gaze. Over the weeks they had worked together, she had come to know Adrian not just as a vampire prince, but as a man, intelligent, passionate, surprisingly gentle despite his supernatural nature. And somewhere along the way, her professional admiration had deepened into something far more personal. "Adrian," she said softly, "can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why is this so important to you? The cooking, I mean. You're a prince, you have wealth and power and influence. Why spend your time in a kitchen?" Adrian was quiet for a moment, his hands still resting on her waist. "Because food is one of the few things that connects all living beings. Humans, vampires, werewolves, fae, we all need sustenance, we all have hungers that go beyond the physical." His expression grew distant, When I was first turned, I thought I had lost everything that made me human. I couldn't taste food, couldn't enjoy the simple pleasures that had once brought me joy. I felt empty. And now? Now I'm learning that humanity isn't something you lose when you become a vampire. It's something you choose to keep. Adrian's smile was warm and genuine, and you're helping me keep it. How? By showing me that creation is more powerful than destruction, by proving that even a monster can learn to nourish rather than simply consume. Adrian's voice grew tender. By looking at me and seeing not a vampire, but a man worth knowing. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Serafina could feel the pull of attraction, the way her heart raced whenever he looked at her like that. But she also felt the weight of uncertainty. What could possibly develop between a human woman and a vampire prince? Serafina, Adrian said quietly, I need to tell you something. What? I'm falling in love with you. The words hung in the air between them, simple and profound and terrifying. Serafina stared into his red eyes and saw nothing but sincerity and vulnerability. Adrian, I know it's impossible. I know I'm asking you to consider something that goes against every rational thought you've ever had. But I can't pretend anymore that this is just about cooking. Adrian's hands tightened slightly on her waist. You've become the most important thing in my world, Serafina. You've brought light into a darkness I thought was permanent. I don't know what to say, Serafina whispered. Say what your heart tells you. Not what logic dictates, not what society expects, but what you truly feel. Serafina looked into his eyes and saw her own feelings reflected there. The growing affection, the deepening connection, the sense that she had found something precious and rare. I'm falling in love with you too, she said softly. And it terrifies me. Why? Because you're immortal and I'm human. Because you're a prince and I'm a disgraced palace cook. Because this can't possibly end well for either of us. Can't it? Adrian's smile was gentle and hopeful. Serafina, I've lived for 4 centuries, and in all that time, I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. Doesn't that count for something? It counts for everything, Serafina admitted. But what kind of future could we have? I'll grow old and die while you remain exactly the same. Not necessarily. Adrian's expression grew serious. There are options. Ways that a human can be transformed, can join their vampire partner in immortality. You're talking about turning me into a vampire. I'm talking about offering you a choice, not now, not until you're ready, but someday if you wanted it. Adrian's voice was careful, measured. But even if you chose to remain human, I would rather have 50 years with you than an eternity without you. You really mean that? I've never meant anything more in my very long life. Serafina felt tears prick her eyes at the sincerity in his voice. What happens now? Now we continue as we have been. We cook together. We learn from each other. We see where this connection leads us. Adrian's smile was warm and patient. There's no pressure, Serafina, no expectations beyond what you're willing to give. And if I wanted more, if I wanted to explore what this could become, then I would be the happiest vampire who has ever existed. Their first kiss was soft and tentative, a question asked and answered without words. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless with emotion. This is insane, Serafina whispered against his lips. The best things usually are, Adrian replied, pulling her closer. As they held each other in the kitchen, surrounded by the tools and ingredients of their shared passion, Serafina realized that her life had taken another impossible turn. She was in love with a vampire prince, and somehow, miraculously, he loved her back. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like coming home. The next few weeks passed in a blur of culinary experimentation and growing intimacy. By day, Serafina explored the castle and its grounds, marveling at the ancient architecture and the supernatural beings who served as Adrian's household staff. By night, she worked alongside Adrian in the kitchen, creating dishes that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. But it was the quiet moments between the cooking that she treasured most, the conversations over shared meals, the gentle touches as they worked side by side, the way Adrian looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in his world. I have something to show you. Adrian said one evening as they finished cleaning up after a particularly successful experiment with vampire-safe pastries. "What is it? A surprise? Something I think you'll appreciate." Adrian offered her his arm. "Will you trust me?" "Always," Serafina said without hesitation. He led her through parts of the castle she had never seen before, up winding staircases and through corridors lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors. Finally, they stopped before a heavy wooden door carved with intricate designs. "Close your eyes," Adrian instructed. Serafina obeyed, feeling him guide her through the doorway and into a space that smelled of herbs and spices and something indefinably magical. "Open them," Adrian said softly. Serafina gasped at what she saw. They were standing in the most magnificent kitchen she had ever imagined, easily 3 times the size of the one they had been using, with every conceivable tool and ingredient arranged with meticulous care. Copper pots gleamed on marble countertops, rare spices filled crystal jars that lined the walls, and a massive hearth dominated one end of the room. But it was the details that made her heart race with excitement. A section devoted entirely to supernatural ingredients, with preservation spells that kept them fresh indefinitely. A library of cookbooks that included texts she had only heard whispered about in legends. Equipment that had been designed specifically for vampire cuisine. Tools that could handle ingredients too dangerous for conventional cooking. "This is incredible," she breathed. "How long did it take you to put this together?" "I've been working on it since the day you agreed to stay," Adrian said, his voice warm with pride and affection. "I wanted to create a space worthy of your talents, a kitchen where you could experiment without limitations. You did this for me?" "I did this for us, for the work we're doing together, for the future we're building." Adrian moved to stand behind her, his arms encircling her waist. "Serafina, I want you to know that this is your kitchen now, your domain. I'm not just offering you a job anymore. I'm offering you a partnership in every sense of the word." "What do you mean?" "I mean that I want you to be my partner in ruling Ravencrest. I want you to help me build bridges between the vampire and human worlds, to use your gifts to create understanding where there has only been fear." Adrian's voice grew tender. "I want you to be my princess, Serafina, my wife, my equal, my partner for eternity." Serafina turned in his arms, her heart pounding with excitement and love and just a touch of fear. "Are you proposing to me?" "I'm asking you to consider it, to think about what we could accomplish together, what we could build." Adrian's red eyes were intense with emotion. "I'm asking you to marry me, Serafina, to become Princess of Ravencrest and help me rule with wisdom and compassion. And if I say yes, what happens then?" "Then we plan the most extraordinary wedding feast in vampire history. Then we spend our honeymoon traveling to every supernatural court in Europe, introducing you as my princess and establishing you as the foremost authority on vampire cuisine." Adrian's smile was brilliant with hope. "Then we spend the rest of our very long lives creating magic together, both in the kitchen and in the world. The rest of our very long lives, if you want it, if you choose to accept the transformation that would make you my immortal partner." Adrian's expression grew serious. "But only if you want it, Serafina. Only if you're certain it's what you desire." Serafina looked around the magnificent kitchen, at the tools and ingredients that represented infinite possibilities for creation and discovery. She thought about the work they had done together, the barriers they had broken, the magic they had created with nothing but skill and passion and love. "Yes," she said softly. "Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll become your princess. Yes, I want to spend eternity creating magic with you." Serafina rose on her toes to kiss him, pouring all her love and hope and excitement into the gesture. Yes to all of it. Adrian's kiss in return was passionate and tender and full of promise for the future they would build together. When they finally broke apart, both were laughing with pure joy. "When?" Serafina asked. "Whenever you're ready. Tomorrow, next month. Next year, I'll wait as long as you need." "I don't want to wait," Serafina said firmly. "I've spent too many years waiting for my life to begin. I want to start our future now. Then we'll start planning immediately. But first, Adrian said, producing a small velvet box from his coat. "I believe this is traditional." The ring inside was unlike anything Serafina had ever seen, a blood-red ruby surrounded by diamonds that seemed to capture and hold the light like tiny stars. When Adrian slipped it onto her finger, it fit perfectly, and she could swear she felt a tingle of magic as it settled into place. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It belonged to my mother. She was human when she married my father, and she chose to become a vampire for love." Adrian's voice was soft with memory. She always said that the greatest magic was finding someone who loved you for who you truly were, not who they wanted you to become. And who am I, truly? You're the woman who turned disgrace into opportunity, who learned to create magic in the kitchen, who saw a monster and chose to love the man beneath. Adrian's smile was radiant with love and pride. "You're my princess, Serafina, my partner, my equal, my heart." As they stood together in their magnificent kitchen, surrounded by the tools of their shared passion and the promise of their shared future, Serafina reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. She had started as a disgraced palace cook, cast out for a single moment of clumsiness. She was ending as a vampire princess, about to embark on an immortal adventure with the man she loved. It was, she thought with a smile, the most delicious transformation imaginable. 3 months later, the great hall of Ravencrest Castle had been transformed into something from a fairy tale. Here, fairy tales included vampire nobility from across Europe and a wedding feast that defied every convention of both human and supernatural cuisine. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow light across tables laden with dishes that seemed to glow with their own inner fire, while the air itself shimmered with magic and possibility. Serafina stood before an ancient mirror in her bridal chamber, hardly recognizing the woman looking back at her. The wedding dress was a masterpiece of ivory silk and silver thread, designed to complement her new status as a vampire princess. But it was more than the dress that had transformed her. It was the confidence in her posture, the joy in her eyes, the sense of belonging that radiated from every pore. "You look magnificent, Your Highness," said Elena, the vampire lady-in-waiting who had become Serafina's closest friend over the past months. "Prince Adrian won't be able to take his eyes off you." "Your Highness," Serafina repeated with a laugh. "I'm still getting used to that." "You'll have eternity to adjust," Elena said with a smile, "though I suspect you'll be too busy revolutionizing vampire society to worry about titles." It was true. In the 3 months since accepting Adrian's proposal, Serafina had thrown herself into preparing not just for their wedding, but for her new role as Princess of Ravencrest. She had studied vampire law and politics, learned the intricate protocols of supernatural diplomacy, and continued to develop her culinary skills to levels that amazed even Adrian. But tonight was about more than politics or cooking. Tonight was about love and the promise of forever with the man who had seen her worth when no one else could. "The guests are assembled, Your Highness," Elena announced. "Prince Adrian is waiting at the altar." Serafina took a deep breath, smoothed her skirts, and walked toward her destiny. The ceremony itself was a blend of human and vampire traditions, conducted in the castle's ancient chapel under the light of a full moon. Representatives from every major vampire house in Europe had come to witness the union, along with a carefully selected group of human allies who had proven themselves trustworthy with supernatural secrets. But as Serafina walked down the aisle, her eyes were only for Adrian. He stood at the altar in formal court dress, his dark hair gleaming in the candlelight and his red eyes warm with love and pride. When she reached his side, he took her hands in his and smiled with such radiance that several guests actually gasped. "Dearly beloved," the vampire priest began, his voice carrying the weight of centuries, "we are gathered here tonight to witness the union of Prince Adrian Dracul and Lady Serafina Blackwood, to celebrate their love and to welcome a new princess into our ancient bloodline." The vows they exchanged were traditional in form, but deeply personal in content, promising not just love and fidelity, but partnership in all things, ruling together, creating together, facing whatever challenges immortality might bring as equals and allies. "Do you, Adrian, take Serafina to be your princess and partner, to rule beside you with wisdom and compassion, to share your immortal life and all the joys and sorrows it may bring. I do, Adrian said, his voice ringing with conviction, for now and for always. Do you, Serafina, take Adrian to be your prince and partner, to rule beside him with strength and grace, to share his immortal burden and transform it into something beautiful? I do, Serafina replied, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was promising. For now and for always. Then, by the ancient laws of our kind, and the power vested in me by the Vampire Council, I pronounce you husband and wife, prince and princess of Ravencrest. The priest smiled. You may kiss your bride, your highness. Adrian's kiss was tender and passionate and full of promise for the centuries to come. When they finally broke apart, the chapel erupted in applause and cheers from beings who had lived for hundreds of years, but had rarely seen love triumph so completely. But it was the wedding feast that truly showcased what Serafina had accomplished. Every dish was a masterpiece that bridged the gap between human and vampire cuisine, foods that could be enjoyed by both species, that satisfied supernatural hungers while celebrating the simple pleasure of shared meals. The centerpiece was a wedding cake that seemed to defy physics, its layers shifting between solid and ethereal, its flavors changing with each bite to reflect the preferences of whoever tasted it. Human guests experienced rich chocolate and vanilla, while vampires tasted the complex metallic notes that their altered physiology craved. Extraordinary, murmured Count Vladislav, one of the oldest vampires in attendance. I haven't enjoyed food like this in 3 centuries. Princess Serafina has quite literally revolutionized our understanding of what's possible, agreed Lady Morgana, a powerful vampire duchess. This feast will be talked about for decades. But it was Adrian's reaction that mattered most to Serafina. As they moved through the reception, greeting guests and accepting congratulations, she could see the pride and love in his eyes every time he looked at her. Happy? He asked during a quiet moment between toasts. Deliriously, Serafina replied, though I have to admit, I'm a little nervous about the transformation. They had decided to wait until after the wedding to complete her change from human to vampire, wanting their first days as husband and wife to be free from the complications of supernatural transformation. We don't have to do it tonight, Adrian said gently. We can wait as long as you need. No, I'm ready. I want to start our immortal life together as soon as possible. Serafina smiled. Besides, I'm curious to see how my cooking changes when I have vampire senses. It's going to be incredible, Adrian said with conviction. You're already the most talented supernatural chef I've ever known. With vampire abilities, you'll be unstoppable. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Serafina found herself alone with Adrian in their private chambers. The transformation would take place here, in the safety and privacy of their own rooms, with only Eleanor and Adrian's most trusted advisors present to ensure everything went smoothly. Are you certain? Adrian asked one last time as they prepared for the ritual. Once it's done, there's no going back. I've never been more certain of anything, Serafina said firmly. I want this, Adrian. I want forever with you. The transformation itself was unlike anything Serafina could have imagined. Adrian's bite was not painful, but rather intensely pleasurable, sending waves of sensation through her entire body. As her human blood flowed out and vampire blood flowed in, she felt herself becoming something new, something more than she had been before. When it was over, she opened eyes that now saw the world with supernatural clarity. Colors were more vivid, sounds more distinct, and she could sense the magical energy that flowed through everything around her. How do you feel? Adrian asked, his voice filled with concern and hope. Alive, Serafina said wonderingly. More alive than I've ever felt before. She looked around their chambers with her new vision and gasped. Everything is so intense, so beautiful. And you're hungry, Adrian said with a knowing smile. Not for food, but for blood. It's natural. The transformation requires enormous energy. He was right. Serafina could feel a new hunger awakening within her, different from anything she had experienced as a human. But it wasn't frightening. It was simply another aspect of her new existence to master and understand. Will you teach me, she asked, how to feed properly, how to control the hunger? I'll teach you everything, Adrian promised, We have eternity to learn together." Over the following weeks, Serafina adjusted to her new existence with a grace that amazed everyone around her. She learned to control her vampire strength, to use her enhanced senses to their fullest potential, and to feed responsibly from willing donors who were well compensated for their contribution. But it was in the kitchen that her transformation truly shone. With vampire senses, she could perceive flavors and aromas that had been completely invisible to her human palate. She could sense the magical properties of supernatural ingredients with unprecedented precision, could feel the way different components would interact before she even combined them. "This is incredible," she said one evening as she prepared a new dish, a soup that could help young vampires control their bloodlust while satisfying their need for complex flavors. "I can actually see how the ingredients want to work together. It's like they're speaking to me." "That's exactly what it is," Adrian said, watching her work with obvious pride and adoration. Vampire senses allow us to perceive the essential nature of things, to understand them on a level that goes beyond the physical. No wonder vampire cuisine has remained unchanged for so long. With senses like these, why would anyone want to experiment? Serafina added a pinch of crystallized starlight to the soup and watched it shimmer with new possibilities. But that's exactly why it needs to change. Just because something has always been done one way doesn't mean it's the best way. "Spoken like a true revolutionary," Adrian said with a laugh. "Have I mentioned lately that I love your mind?" "Only every day," Serafina replied, but she was smiling. "And I love yours. We make a good team, don't we? The best, in the kitchen and out of it." Their partnership had indeed proven to be extraordinary. In the months since their wedding, they had established the first academy of supernatural cuisine where vampires, werewolves, and other supernatural beings could learn to prepare food that satisfied their unique needs while maintaining their connection to the broader world. Serafina had also begun writing what would become the definitive cookbook of vampire cuisine, a comprehensive guide that combined ancient recipes with modern innovations, traditional techniques with revolutionary approaches. It was already being hailed as a masterwork by supernatural scholars across Europe. But perhaps most importantly, they had begun hosting regular dinners that brought together humans and supernatural beings in an atmosphere of mutual respect and understanding. These gatherings were helping to bridge gaps that had existed for centuries, creating connections that were slowly changing the relationship between the mortal and immortal worlds. "Your Highness," Elena announced, entering the kitchen with obvious excitement. "You have visitors. Very important visitors." "Who?" Serafina asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "Queen Isabel and her entire court. They're requesting an audience." Serafina felt her stomach clench with old anxiety. She hadn't seen her former employer since the night of her disgrace, and she had no idea what the Queen might want. "Did she say what this was about?" Adrian asked, moving protectively closer to his wife. "She mentioned something about a royal wedding," Elena said with barely contained glee. "Apparently, the Crown Prince of a neighboring kingdom has very specific dietary requirements, and they need someone who understands supernatural cuisine." Serafina and Adrian exchanged glances, understanding immediately. The Crown Prince was clearly not human, and Queen Isabel, who had once dismissed Serafina as a worthless commoner, now needed her expertise desperately. "Show them to the formal dining room," Serafina said, her voice steady despite the irony of the situation. "We'll be there shortly." "Are you ready for this?" Adrian asked as they prepared to face her former tormentors. "More than ready," Serafina replied, straightening her shoulders with newfound confidence. "I'm not the same woman who knelt in broken porcelain 3 months ago. I'm Princess Serafina Dracul, and I have nothing to be ashamed of." The scene in the dining room was everything Serafina could have hoped for. Queen Isabel sat stiffly in her chair, clearly uncomfortable with having to ask for help from someone she had once dismissed so cruelly. The other courtiers looked equally uncomfortable, their eyes darting nervously between Serafina and Adrian. "Your Majesties," Queen Isabel said, rising to curtsy as they entered. The title came out strained, as if it physically pained her to acknowledge Serafina's new status. "Your Majesty," Serafina replied graciously, inclining her head with just the right amount of royal dignity. "To what do we owe this unexpected pleasure?" We, that is, the kingdom, finds itself in need of your expertise, Queen Isabel said, her voice tight with barely suppressed humiliation. The Crown Prince of Valdoria has requested a marriage alliance, but he has very specific dietary requirements for the wedding feast. I see, Serafina said calmly. And what makes you think I might be able to help with such requirements? We've heard rumors, one of the courtiers said nervously. Stories about the extraordinary feasts you've prepared here at Ravencrest, food that can satisfy unusual appetites. Ah, Adrian said with a slight smile. You've heard about our work in supernatural cuisine. Is it true? Queen Isabel asked desperately. Can you really prepare food that creatures like vampires can enjoy? Among other things, yes, Serafina said. My husband and I have developed techniques that allow us to create cuisine suitable for a wide variety of supernatural beings. Then you could help us? You could prepare a wedding feast that would satisfy the Crown Prince's needs? Serafina was quiet for a long moment, savoring the delicious irony of the situation. The woman who had called her a worthless commoner was now begging for her help, acknowledging, however reluctantly, that Serafina possessed skills that no one else in the kingdom could match. I could, she said finally, but I'm afraid my services don't come cheaply. Creating supernatural cuisine requires rare ingredients, specialized techniques, and considerable expertise. Name your price, Queen Isabel said quickly. Whatever you want, we'll pay it. I don't want money, Serafina said, her voice growing stronger. I want an apology. An apology. A public acknowledgement that you were wrong to dismiss me so cruelly, that you failed to recognize my worth and potential. Serafina's eyes were steady and unforgiving. I want you to admit that the worthless commoner you cast out has become something you now desperately need. The silence that followed was deafening. Queen Isabel's face went through several interesting color changes as she struggled with her pride and her desperation. She began, then stopped, clearly unable to force the words out. Take your time, Serafina said pleasantly. I'm in no hurry. Your Highness, one of the courtiers said desperately, surely we can come to some other arrangement. No, Serafina said firmly. This is my price. An apology and a public acknowledgement of my skills and worth. Nothing more, nothing less. Finally, Queen Isabel's desperation won out over her pride. I was wrong, she said, the words coming out like they were being torn from her throat. I was wrong to dismiss you, wrong to treat you so cruelly. You have skills that I failed to recognize, worth that I was too blind to see. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the way I treated you. Sorry for the humiliation I caused you. Queen Isabel's voice grew stronger as she continued. You've clearly become something extraordinary, and I was a fool not to see your potential. Thank you, Serafina said graciously. Apology accepted. Now, about this wedding feast. The next few hours were spent in detailed planning, with Serafina outlining exactly what would be required to create a feast suitable for a vampire prince and his human bride. The menu she proposed was ambitious and expensive, requiring ingredients that would have to be sourced from across Europe. But it was also brilliant, a perfect blend of human and supernatural cuisine that would satisfy the Crown Prince's vampiric needs while allowing the human guests to enjoy the celebration as well. This is extraordinary, Queen Isabel admitted as Serafina finished her presentation. I had no idea such cuisine was even possible. Few people do, Serafina replied. Supernatural cuisine is a highly specialized field, and there are very few practitioners who truly understand its complexities. And you're willing to prepare this feast for us? I am, but I have conditions beyond the apology. What conditions? First, I want full creative control over the menu. No interference, no suggestions, no changes unless I approve them. Serafina's voice was firm and professional. Second, I want a formal acknowledgement of my role in the feast's success. This will be prepared by Princess Serafina Dracul of Ravencrest, not by anonymous palace cooks. Agreed, Queen Isabel said quickly. And third, I want this to be the beginning of a new relationship between our kingdoms, regular diplomatic exchanges, trade agreements, cultural partnerships. Serafina smiled. I believe our two realms could benefit greatly from closer cooperation. Yes, of course. Whatever you think best." As the former royal court departed, laden with detailed lists of ingredients and preparations, Serafina felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had not only proven her worth to those who had dismissed her, but she had also opened new possibilities for cooperation between the human and supernatural worlds. "How does it feel?" Adrian asked as they watched the carriages disappear down the drive. "Like justice," Serafina said with a smile. "Sweet, delicious justice." "And the feast itself, are you looking forward to it?" "Absolutely. It's going to be the most challenging project I've ever undertaken, but also the most rewarding." Serafina turned to face her husband, her eyes bright with excitement. "We're going to create something that will be talked about for generations. Something that proves supernatural cuisine can be every bit as sophisticated and beautiful as any human feast." "We?" "Of course we. You don't think I'm doing this without my partner, do you?" Serafina rose on her toes to kiss him. "Besides, I'll need your expertise on vampire physiology to make sure everything is perfectly balanced. In that case, I can't wait to get started." The royal wedding feast took place 6 weeks later, and it was everything Serafina had promised and more. The great hall of the neighboring kingdom's palace had been transformed into a wonderland of culinary artistry, with dishes that seemed to glow with their own inner light and flavors that defied conventional understanding. The Crown Prince, a young vampire who had been struggling to maintain his humanity while fulfilling his royal duties, was visibly moved by the feast. For the first time since his transformation, he was able to enjoy food alongside his human bride, to participate fully in the celebration of their union. "This is extraordinary," he said to Serafina during the reception. "I had resigned myself to a lifetime of pretending to enjoy food I couldn't taste. You've given me back something I thought I had lost forever." "That's what good food should do," Serafina replied. "It should bring people together, should create connections and shared experiences. You've done more than that, you've created magic." As the evening progressed, Serafina found herself surrounded by nobles and dignitaries who wanted to discuss her techniques, to learn about supernatural cuisine, to explore the possibilities she had opened up. Several offered her positions, others proposed partnerships, and more than one suggested that she should open a school to teach her methods. "You've started something," Adrian observed as they finally returned to Ravencrest in the early hours of dawn. "This is just the beginning." "Good," Serafina said firmly. "It's time the world learned that supernatural beings aren't monsters to be feared, but people with their own needs and desires and dreams. Food is just the beginning. It's a way to build understanding, to create connections." "And what's next for the famous Princess Serafina?" "Next, we expand the academy. We start training chefs from across Europe in supernatural cuisine. We publish the cookbook and make this knowledge available to anyone who wants to learn." Serafina's eyes were bright with vision and purpose. "We change the world, one meal at a time." "I love your ambition," Adrian said, pulling her into his arms. "Almost as much as I love you. Just almost." "Well, your ambition is impressive, but your cooking is divine. And you," Adrian's smile was tender and full of promise, "you are everything I never knew I needed." As they stood together in their magnificent kitchen, surrounded by the tools and ingredients of their shared passion, Serafina reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. She had started as a disgraced palace cook, dismissed and humiliated for a single moment of clumsiness. She had become a vampire princess, a revolutionary chef, and a bridge between two worlds that had been separated by fear and misunderstanding for far too long. "Adrian," she said softly. "Yes, my love." "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing my worth when no one else could. For giving me the chance to become who I was meant to be. For building me a kitchen where I could create magic." Serafina smiled, her heart full of love and gratitude and excitement for the future. "For making me your princess in every way that matters. Thank you for accepting the offer. Thank you for choosing to spend eternity with a vampire who needed to learn how to live again." Adrian's red eyes were warm with emotion. "Thank you for proving that the most beautiful transformations happen not when we change what we are, but when we become who we were always meant to be." And who was I meant to be? The most extraordinary chef who ever lived, my partner in all things, the woman who turned a vampire's hunger into a feast of love. As dawn broke over Ravencrest Castle, the vampire prince and his princess stood together in their kitchen of dreams, surrounded by the promise of forever and the endless possibilities that stretched before them. They had built something beautiful together, not just a marriage, but a legacy that would change the world. And in the quiet hours before they retired to their chambers, when the castle slept and the kitchen hummed with the magic of their shared dreams, they continued their eternal dance of creation, two souls united by their belief that love was indeed the most essential ingredient of all. 5 years later, the Academy of Supernatural Cuisine had grown beyond anything Serafina and Adrian had originally envisioned. What had started as a small school in one wing of Ravencrest Castle had expanded into a sprawling complex that attracted students from across Europe and beyond. Princess Serafina stood in the main kitchen, watching her latest class of students, a diverse group that included young vampires, werewolves, witches, and even a few brave humans, as they attempted to prepare their first blood-enhanced sauce. "Remember," she called out, moving between the workstations with the grace and confidence that had become her trademark, "the key is balance. Too much Starlight essence and the sauce will overwhelm any dish you pair it with. Too little, and it won't provide the supernatural enhancement your vampire diners need." "Professor Serafina," called out Marcus, a young vampire who had been struggling with the more delicate aspects of supernatural cuisine. "Mine isn't glowing the way yours did. What am I doing wrong?" Serafina moved to his station and examined his work with the expert eye she had developed over 5 years of teaching. "You're being too cautious with the moonstone powder. Supernatural ingredients respond to confidence. If you add them tentatively, they won't fully activate." She demonstrated the proper technique, and Marcus's sauce immediately began to shimmer with the ethereal light that marked a successful preparation. "Incredible," he breathed. "How do you make it look so easy?" "Practice," Serafina said with a smile, "and passion. You can't create magic in the kitchen if you don't love what you're doing." As the class ended and the students filed out to practice their techniques, Adrian appeared in the doorway with the expression of barely contained excitement that Serafina had learned to recognize. "What is it?" she asked, untying her apron. "A letter from the Vampire Council in Rome. They want to commission you to prepare the feast for the Centennial Gathering." Serafina's eyes widened. The Centennial Gathering was the most important event in vampire society, a meeting of every major vampire house in the world that took place only once every 100 years. To be asked to cater such an event was the highest honor that could be bestowed on any supernatural chef. "They want me to cook for the entire Vampire Council. They want you to create a feast that will be remembered for the next century, a celebration of how far vampire cuisine has evolved under your influence." Adrian's smile was brilliant with pride. "They're calling you the greatest culinary innovator in vampire history." "We," Serafina corrected automatically. "We're the greatest culinary innovators. I couldn't have done any of this without you. And I couldn't have imagined any of this without you." Adrian pulled her into his arms, spinning her around the kitchen in a burst of pure joy. "Do you realize what this means? You've gone from a disgraced palace cook to the most celebrated chef in the supernatural world." "We've gone from strangers to partners to legends," Serafina corrected, laughing as he set her down. "And we're just getting started." It was true. In addition to the Academy and her consulting work for supernatural courts across Europe, Serafina had published 3 cookbooks that had revolutionized how supernatural beings thought about food. She had also established a network of restaurants that catered specifically to supernatural clientele, creating safe spaces where vampires, werewolves, and other beings could dine without fear of discovery. But perhaps most importantly, she had helped to change the relationship between the human and supernatural worlds. Her work had proven that cooperation was possible, that understanding could bridge even the most fundamental differences. "There's something else," Adrian said, his expression growing tender. "Something I've been wanting to discuss with you." "What?" "Children." Serafina felt her heart skip a beat. They had talked about the possibility before, but vampire reproduction was complicated, requiring careful planning and considerable magical intervention. "Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying that I think we're ready. We've built something beautiful together, created a legacy that will outlast us both. But I want to share it with someone who carries the best of both of us. Adrian's red eyes were warm with love and hope. I want to have a family with you, Serafina. A vampire child. A child who will grow up understanding both worlds, who will carry on our work of building bridges between the human and supernatural realms. Adrian's voice grew passionate. A child who will inherit your creativity and compassion, who will help shape the future we're building. Serafina felt tears, vampire tears that sparkled like diamonds flow down her cheeks. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I want that too. Really? Really? I want to teach our child to cook, to create, to see the magic in bringing people together around a shared meal. Serafina smiled through her tears. I want to show them that love really is the most essential ingredient of all. As they held each other in their magnificent kitchen, surrounded by the tools and ingredients of their shared passion, Serafina reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. She had started as a woman who had lost everything, her position, her reputation, her future. She had become a princess, a revolutionary, a bridge between worlds, and now, soon, a mother. But more than any of that, she had become herself, fully, completely, without apology or compromise. She had learned that true worth wasn't determined by titles or positions, but by the courage to pursue your passions and the wisdom to share your gifts with the world. Adrian, she said softly. Yes, my love. Do you ever think about that night? The night we met? Every day it was the night my real life began. Mine too. I thought I had lost everything, but I had actually found it. Serafina smiled, her heart full of love and gratitude and excitement for the future. I found you. I found my calling. I found myself. And I found the woman who taught me that monsters can become men, that hunger can become love, that even the darkest existence can be transformed into something beautiful. As night fell over Ravencrest Castle and the Academy settled into its evening rhythm, the vampire prince and his princess began planning their next adventure. Not just the centennial gathering feast that would cement Serafina's reputation as the greatest supernatural chef in history, but the family they would build and the legacy they would leave. They had proven that love could conquer any obstacle, that passion could transform any situation, that two people who believed in each other could change the world. And in the quiet hours before dawn, when the kitchen hummed with the magic of their shared dreams and the promise of new life grew within Serafina's immortal form, they continued their eternal dance of creation, two souls united by their belief that the most beautiful transformations happen when we have the courage to become who we were always meant to be. The disgraced palace cook had become a vampire princess, and together they had built an empire of love, one perfect dish at a time. What an absolutely delicious journey of transformation and triumph we just experienced. From that devastating opening where Serafina's career was destroyed in front of the entire court, to Adrian's mysterious arrival and recognition of her true worth, to their gorgeous love story built around supernatural cuisine, every moment had me completely captivated. The way Adrian saw Serafina's potential when everyone else saw only failure just melted my heart completely. And watching her go from a worthless commoner to the most celebrated supernatural chef in history, pure perfection. That scene where Queen Isabel had to come crawling back and beg for Serafina's help was absolutely iconic. Talk about sweet revenge served at the perfect temperature. I'm still getting emotional thinking about how they built their love story around food, creating dishes that bridge the gap between human and vampire worlds. The symbolism of nourishment, transformation, and love as the most essential ingredient was just chef's kiss perfect. Which moment hit you hardest? Was it when Adrian first tasted her cooking and realized her incredible talent? When she chose to become a vampire to spend eternity creating magic with him? Or that gorgeous scene where she got her revenge on Queen Isabel while establishing herself as culinary royalty? If this story of culinary magic, vampire romance, and rising from disgrace to become royalty moved your soul, smash that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. Your support helps me bring you more tales where love conquers all and passion transforms everything. Drop a comment below and tell me, do you think you could have handled Seraphina's transformation from human to vampire as gracefully as she did? And what did you think of the way food became their love language? Plus, I'm dying to know which supernatural dish from the story sounded most intriguing to you. Next week, I'm bringing you another mouth-watering supernatural romance. She was cursed to poison everything she touched, until the Dragon King begged her to cook for him. Get ready for dangerous magic, forbidden love, and a heroine who discovers that sometimes our greatest curses can become our most powerful gifts. Until then, remember that the most beautiful love stories are seasoned with passion, garnished with dreams, and served with a generous helping of believing in yourself.